Hello and welcome to the second edition of our series Safe Spaces with Khushi from Khushi Clinic. As you know, the first time we began our debut with discussing the joy, or rather reclaiming the joy in the healing process, and we felt that it might be a good idea this time for the second edition to talk about therapy in small town India. I think it might be fair to say that there is still a fair bit of stigma and taboo that surrounds mental health, and particularly talking about it and seeking professional help. I know that even in relatively smaller cities such as our own in Jaipur, there have been therapists who've told me all kinds of things. Clients who go to them tell them that they will enter as quickly as possible from the back of service entrance so that they're not spotted. And all this happens because of that very stigma and taboo that is still attached to it. And it's very, very intriguing and interesting and important, therefore, to examine what and how the situation really is in small town India. Is it worse still? Is it different in different ways? And that's what we hope to discuss and determine with Khushi today. So Khushi, welcome once again.
Thank you.
Let's dive straight in and share, if you will, some of your observations, either personal experiences as a therapist or things that you've heard from within your professional community in terms of how people by and large perceive mental health and professional mental health.
So in a country like India, where there is a lot of diversity, there are tier 1 cities, there are tier 2 cities, there is a common notion that therapy is for the privileged and by the privileged. And I, for one, do not feel how it should be perceived by people. That's not the perception I, as a therapist, want other people to have, or in any way would I want to support that. I would like to create that space, that holding space for each and every one, where they all feel safe, where they all understand how humbling therapy can be and is. So I've worked with tier 1 clients, of course, and I've worked with a lot of clients who are in tier 2 cities like Jaipur. In tier 2 cities like Jaipur, there are clients who are younger in age, who understand the concept of therapy, because post-COVID there has been a lot of internet surge in the idea of mental health, in the idea of learning about therapy, what it is, its importance. So I'm happy that that conversation has slowly started. However, the parental support that is needed for it, the financial support that is needed for it, is always absent. And I, as a practitioner, provide pro bono therapy for clients who recognize the importance of therapy, who want to work on themselves. And however, because there is an absence of parental and financial support, they are unable to do that. So with one of my clients, she was, even though she was, above 18, she was 19 years of age, she consistently in the first few sessions kept asking me, will you tell my parents? Will they be involved in any way? I have not stated them as their emergency contact, because I don't think they will be able to understand that their daughter is going to see a therapist, she's going to see a shrink. They will feel that I am mad, and their first concern for me, being a girl child, will be that no one is going to get married to you because you are going to a therapist. So these are the kind of stereotypes, these are the kind of taboos that are attached in a country like in India. It's a third world country where a lot of recognition for therapy, even though it is present in the metros, it is absent in tier 2 and tier 3 cities. So, yeah, these are a few things that I have noticed as a therapist. I provide a safe space for people to come, people to trust. Therapy doesn't necessarily mean, having a very fancy office where people can come who can afford sessions with you, but it is also my responsibility as a therapist to provide that space for people who want and need that support. So yeah, that is something that I've been trying to build with Khushia. That is something that I see as a vision. I see myself responsible for these things. Yeah.
Lots of thoughts are coming to my mind, Khushi, and I'm absolutely convinced by what you're saying and agree with it. But a few points that I would like to share, which pretty much support and bolster what you're saying. The fact that India is so diverse, so multicultural, and so layered in every aspect of life. People belong to different financial stratas, communities, thinking, ideology, etc., is absolutely our greatest uniqueness, strength, and something to celebrate. But what that does is that when it comes to an area or a realm like mental health, it's very difficult to make a sweeping or generalized statement. So, as Khushi said, there are many Indias within one India, and therefore there are many realities that coexist, contradictory realities that coexist, that apply to different communities, different cities, different states, different towns. While on the one hand, as an educator, I can corroborate that a younger and younger breed of people, couples who are becoming parents now are much more open, have a genuine understanding, if not medically, but intellectually, of the critical importance of mental health, are a lot more open, therefore, to taking their children for checkups, for assessments, whether it's to determine whether the child is on a particular learning spectrum, etc. There's a lot more openness and there's a lot more evolution. However, the beauty but contradiction of India is that simultaneously, what continues to exist is a class of people, a generation of people who still, believe it or not, more inclined, even for a regular medical problem, to go to a Babaji or a witch doctor and have what we say in local parlance, jhad phunk done, rather than anything scientific or traditionally medical. And obviously, that extends very much to mental health, because in the natural pecking order, mental health probably comes last. So all of these different layers coexist, but I'm very, very happy that somebody like Khushi, and I know several other therapists who, along with their professional mental health practices, have a clear mandate that along the way they will provide a combination of psychoeducation, spreading awareness, basic understanding and knowledge, and very critically, as Khushi pointed out, and मुझे ये सुन के बहुत खुशी होती है, that for a very, very definite category of people and individuals who recognize, who are open to trying professional mental help, but either their parents or their families don't support them, she and others like her are offering that opportunity to experience it with little or no pay, whether it's pro bono, whether it is other devices like sliding scale, etc., where there is an opportunity to access and experience that firsthand, so that you may then make a much more informed and educated decision based on your own experience with that particular modality. So that's really, really good. And yeah, I think as far as the evolution of perception goes and changing of perception goes, everybody is at a different sociological stage and phase in their lives and development, and it's a cyclical thing. It will definitely come, perhaps a little later in some cases and sooner in other cases. Would you agree?
I definitely agree with this. Everyone's background, socially, economically, culturally, is different. And again, coming to the point that India is such a diverse nation, I, as a therapist, need to be extremely open-minded with my vision. I need to provide that safe corridor for each and every person coming from whatever diverse background that they are coming from. And I, as a therapist, need to be able to shape shift into their realities. I need to be able to understand those realities from which they are coming from, even though they may feel too far-fetched for me personally or professionally, both. I need to be patient, I need to be kind, I need to be compassionate towards my clients. So that is the approach that I follow. And that is also the approach where I follow for mental health advocacy and awareness.
You brought up a very, very important point, and I'm so glad you brought it up. Out of this diversity emerges a genuine, I don't want to call it a problem, but just, again, it's diversity at play, where just the other day I was talking to a niece of mine who has recently also become a counseling psychologist, and she had a long stint of work in the UK. And coincidentally, a bulk of her work happened to be with the children of minority community immigrants into that country, which automatically meant that they were at a much lower financial strata. And she told me plainly that, Mama, my life and what I know to be life couldn't be more different and more removed from what their reality is.
Yes.
But yet you have to be empathetic enough, and you have to educate yourself enough to be able to support, guide, and assist them. So I want you to talk a little bit more about this, because it naturally comes up, and I think it's a safe assumption. There's no question of sort of trying to offend anybody, but it's a natural corollary that in relatively small town cities, semi-rural centers, that you will come across as a therapist clients who inhabit completely different worlds than your own. What are some of the ways in which you ensure that you can help them?
Okay. So I remember one of the students I had in one of the schools that I'm working with, and she is a girl in 11th grade. She's coming to me for counseling. It was referred by the school. The process of referral was followed over there. And she's someone who's 16 years of age. She has chronic anxiety, and the anxiety is not stemming from the pressure of studies, because she's chosen a very difficult field, which is PCB. She wants to become a doctor. She wants to study psychology, and it is coming from the fact that she's not getting support from her parents. So the differentiation with that is that you're a girl. If you will study medical, that means you're studying for 10 years. When will you get married? When will you settle down?
Correct.
And no matter how many times she's tried to have that dialogue that I don't want to, why are you making me educated? Why have you given me those dreams through the platform of education if you cannot support them? So these are the kind of conversations she's had to have with her parents. And even though she keeps saying that they are very supportive and they want me to study, the response is, we will get you married at 21, and then you can keep studying after marriage. So that is not a solution that you have. That is what you need to live with. That is the worry that she is living with at the age of 16. So the next, 5 years is how she's going to train herself, what are the kind of techniques, what are the kind of routines that she'll have to set, because it's not only the studies that she has to do as a child, it's also learning the household chores, learning the cultural chores that come in with the responsibility of an Indian wife or an Indian woman, and the constant bickering that she also has to face from her mom, that what will your mother-in-law say, you don't even know how to chop vegetables,
Correct.
you don't even know how to keep your almirah clean. So these are the kind of comments, these are the kind of conversations she's having with her own mother. And she wants an environment which is supportive, that understands her needs, that understands that feeling that she has for her parents. She has a lot of gratitude for them, she has a lot of love for them, she has a lot of respect for them. And because she has all of that, she's also very frustrated with the kind of thinking they're coming from. And for me as a therapist, to tell her that, your parents, if their thinking is not realistic in today's time, it doesn't match what they have provided for you and what they want for you in the future, is very easy. To pass that judgment, make that call, it is something very easy. But that is not going to help her reality. That is not going to help her feeling supported, her feeling understood in that space. So for me to provide her with small tools of listening, of holding, of kindness are what I can do. Because as a therapist, no matter how much I would like to bring in that revolution in the society with the kind of thinking I carry from the education I have been graciously provided by my parents, is not a one-man job, right? So for me to provide that support in this particular case, keeping the realities of everyone in mind, keeping the cultural beliefs of everyone in mind, is what I can do. I can talk to her in the language she wants. I can understand the saying she's saying as a 16-year-old, even though she may not have the articulation, even though she may choke at times because it is such an emotional situation for her. I can only as a therapist be compassionate, kind, and provide a holding space. So that is one example that comes to mind, and there are many more such examples. So when I was working with the Mahila Thana in Jaipur, there were a lot of cases from the lower socio-economic strata that were being reported. I'm not saying that these cases take place in that strata. Those are the cases that get reported. Sadly, because in the upper class of the society, they don't believe in the judicial system. They don't believe in reporting cases because there is a lot at stake societally, socially, and the cases that I had were cases where children were not even able to understand the English language. And psychology being a subject which is so modern and Western, to provide that to an Indian context is my job, right? So to be able to talk in their language, to be able to provide them that support, in which they will understand that this is a space where we can come, we can talk to her, we can build that rapport with her, she will understand where we are coming from, she will not judge us, is something that was my job over there. And believe you or not, there were so many girls who were in for the crimes that they had committed. Why they had committed those crimes is something that I wanted to understand, is something was also a part of my job, to provide them with that counseling for their rehabilitation. And they were able to open up so beautifully, so they provided that trust in me. So yeah, that is something that you learn.
Correct me if I'm wrong, what I'm hearing repeatedly is that perhaps a big prerequisite in these scenarios, therefore, is for the mental health professional to be acutely familiar, acquainted, and aware of various societal norms, conditioning, the value system that has been historically prevalent in their geographical area of operation.
Yes, absolutely.
Right. Okay. Two final questions come to mind. Now, one is that, and I think we've sort of discussed this, but I want to tackle it specifically. There is a school of thought where, because a certain older generation, right? So either a certain older generation or the generalization that in, again, relatively smaller cities and towns, not necessarily born from being financially any lesser, because we all know that in fact tier 2 cities and class B towns and things like that have extremely wealthy individuals and families and communities. So I'm not at all suggesting that a lower financial strata is the only factor that leads to a different kind of thought process. It is there in any case as a consequence of, you know, generations of conditioning of a particular community. So either because of the very strongly held and sometimes dogmatic, unshakable belief system of a generation or of a particular community in a relatively small town, do you feel that it is worth the time, effort, and energy in trying to change those perceptions, or simply focus rather on addressing a younger generation that's coming up?
So what I hear is that, to go down that road of mental advocacy is not easy for the older generation, for them to understand, for us to be patient enough that one day there will be a time where they understand it. I feel it is very important for us as a society to address these concerns with that generation as well, because they also are impacted psychologically, emotionally. They are also carrying a lot for many years. Life is not easy for everyone. There must have been times where they have been burnt out, and they may be acting out in their 50s, and everyone calls it, now they are heading towards old age, so thoda satya jate hain. But that is a very common saying that you will hear. But that is exactly what we need to understand, for them to be aware as to why these changes are happening. Of course, there are bodily changes. Of course, there is a biology behind as to why these changes are happening. But to have that lending ear for someone to listen to, for someone to understand. The report of cases of suicide in women while they are going through menopause is a high number. It is on the higher end. There are men who try to take away their lives in late 40s, early 50s, late 50s. And there are a lot of changes. Midlife crisis is something that is very common that we hear. They may leave their jobs. They may not want to provide for the family because it is too burdening for them for so many years that they have gone through. So these are a few cases that I have heard from clients who are younger. So they are being impacted by the actions that their parents take. And for them to understand as a child as to why these changes are happening with my parents, it is very important if the parents themselves are able to understand as to why these changes are happening to them.
Okay, that makes sense. Finally, and I would have asked you this question anyway, but you reminded me of another nuance of this same question when you said the phrase midlife crisis. Now, like many, unfortunately, realities and grim realities connected with mental health and human evolution, midlife crisis, I think you might agree, is another that has been pretty trivialized in popular culture.
Yes.
You will typically come across somebody who's gone and bought an expensive bike or a sports car, and that's, the sum of it all in terms of midlife crisis. But it is, I suppose, in a lot of ways, the manner and the profound manner in which menopause might affect women, a midlife crisis may affect an individual and a man. The larger question, Khushi, is that in terms of spreading awareness and in terms of education, I think we all know that there is a limit to how much very, very straightforward instructional educational can do.
Yes.
Right? And I think it's wise for policymakers, planners, NGOs, therapists to be aware and mindful of the channels and the media that finds most favor and efficacy with a particular target audience. Therefore, would you agree, and please add your own suggestions, that as far as spreading awareness, knowledge, fundamental information goes about mental health, it is might be a good idea to employ things such as films, videos, YouTube series, etc., where in a non-preachy, relatively subtle, little bit entertaining, and by entertaining I don't at all mean belittling or casualizing the conditions, etc., but in a relatively light-hearted, non-preachy manner, communicate those messages subliminally, using conduits that are anyway popularly consumed by a particular target audience. And the reason also I ask this is because, again, the irony that I observe as somebody who's been a media professional is that particularly mental health, for the most part, at least in the Hindi film industry, has really, really been mistreated and misrepresented. So yeah, your general views on this.
So I completely agree that in the mainstream cinema that we have in India, mental health has been used as a device of humor, of comedy, of something that needs to be belittled upon. The casual use of the word कि इसको तो mental hospital में भेज दो और पागल खाना है, and using it in terms of also belittling the women, that mera sasural is equivalent to that of a pagal khana, is something that we keep hearing in a lot of movies. Now, after the reel culture, after COVID, after a lot of suicide cases of people from cinema, people who are well known in the country, there is a trend towards expressing mental health in a little better, in a more respected manner, because of the reel culture that got introduced in COVID, because of the Instagram generation, because of Gen Z. And so I can see a shift in the trend. However, of course, it needs a lot of work. So your suggestions to have YouTube series which are not preachy, or to have people who are creating that content for adults to relate with, for the bloomer generation to relate with, is the need of the hour. And for them to understand it in a manner which is not belittling, because for so many years repeatedly that's what we have been seeing. And this sudden shift in trend, which is very easy to implement but very difficult to embody.
Okay, I'm going to quickly come in here, Khushi, because and I should have added this in my as part of my question itself. Not just films, etc., that are largely in the private domain in terms of who makes them and who produces them. And in fact, this comes up in almost all the dialogues that we have regarding mental health, and particularly when it comes to advocacy, etc., that it needs to be a combined effort of public and private partnership. Even if you look at the PSAs, the public service announcements that the government makes,
Yes.
you will mostly find them on very, very undeniably important issues, tobacco, sanitary pads, etc. But I haven't seen one on mental health.
Yes, that is the mental health in the field of advocacy through the government or PSAs. There is a huge silence, there is a huge absence that is there. And even though there is a lot of work being done on topics like disability, on people belonging to the handicapped community, which has been in talks for more than 30 years, I think we have reached the stage where now mental health can have a say, can have that support through conversations and advocacy and awareness around the topic of mental health. Psychoeducation is also what needs to be addressed. And I can see a change in trend, but of course there needs to be more
Proactiveness?
proactiveness and responsibility taking at the parts of people who run the country, people who
Of all stakeholders,
of all
policymakers, private individuals, organizations, NGOs,
yeah.
all of or that entire sort of ecosystem. In fact, I have, it is with some shame that I admit, but I have no qualms in sharing that I had recently spoken with no less than 30 politicians across party lines to have a dialogue on and around mental health. And out of the 30, believe me, 29 of them spoke very candidly, but strictly and necessarily off camera. And one individual, one lady politician, leader, young, down south, did an actual interaction with us and was quite sort of outspoken. But you see the ratio here, and so there is a fear, and unless, whether it's private individuals of influence, whether it is our leaders of influence, unless these people are seen and heard, I think in that messaging, it's going to be an uphill task. But we must end on a positive note, simply because it is our job to sort of assess the situation regularly, which is not to say, as Khushi very rightly pointed out, that a lot of work has happened and is continuing to happen in the right direction. Please help me sum up the session. Would it be fair to conclude by saying that actually speaking, and since we all know that mental distress doesn't differentiate between the rich and the poor, the big city and the small town, the need for it is omnipresent. The qualifier is that the individual or the group or the organization that's operating in that particular small town or in that realm needs to be very, very, very deeply and intimately familiar with all of the cultural conditioning of that audience.
Yes, of course. And not only does this bring me back to the history of psychology as to how it has evolved, because it is a Western discipline, it is a modern discipline that began in the West, and there were a few people in India who took to task to introduce the Indian context to psychology, to introduce the Indian cultural norms to psychology, and that is exactly what we need to follow with the legacy that they have left behind for us. through advocacy, through awareness in the Indian context. What is therapy is what we need to focus on. We need to accept people from the diversity that India provides, from various languages, from various cultures, from various cities and villages that people belong to. We as psychologists, as a community of people who are advocating for mental health, need to be open-minded, we need to be kind, we need to just provide a humbling, holding space where people can come, discover themselves, explore themselves, where they can grow, change and heal.
So true. Very well encapsulated. I can't resist but add my little two bits here. While, of course, it's factually undeniable that psychology and psychotherapy, as we understand it, is very much a Western concept. In my observation and interaction with many psychologists and therapists, more and more recently, I find that different professionals are drawing from different philosophies and kind of creating their own unique hybrid modality. Now, in a lot of these cases, the resources that they are drawing from and layering and bolstering Western psychology and theories happens to be very much rooted in our Indian mythology, scriptures, spiritual understanding, a lot of things that have been written and spoken and propagated by our great thinkers, philosophers, whether it is oneness, stillness, living in the moment. So many concepts are very much derived from within the rich bosom of spirituality in our country, and that is being amalgamated with Western psychology to actually then make it a holistic, complete and robust offering.
Yes, rightly put, Karthik. There is a lot of Indian traditional context that has been present with psychology, and the recognition of it and the hybridization of it started about 100 years ago in India, 110 years ago in India, when the first department of psychology was set up in Calcutta University. And it is through this hybridization, through this pairing, that we are able to find research and theories which have not only helped us in the Indian context, but has also provided a lot of knowledge at an international level.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So building concepts like spirituality and psychology, the spiritual self, is something which is embedded in the ancient Indian scriptures of finding the higher self, in the need of us to find spirituality. India is a country which has evolved not only emotionally, physically, technologically, but more importantly, spiritually. We are a spiritual nation. We have always been a spiritual nation. And the integration of that in psychology is what we have provided at an international level. It is practiced everywhere. So the concept and techniques of mindfulness is something that is derived from the Indian context.
Absolutely. And I think it might sort of give you the feeling that we've gone off on a tangent, yes. But I think if anything, that very, very real and present and long-standing Indianness and Indian context will only aid in being more effective and getting through to all Indians, irrespective of big city or small town.
Yes, absolutely.
Wonderful. It's been great chatting, and we hope that you draw some value from these conversations. We are very excited about them, and we look forward to your patronage and to bring you the next edition. Take care.
Thank you.